All right, good afternoon, everybody. Was perusing Facebook today, which kind of got me upset, and I probably shouldn't have been doing that. Probably should stay away from the Facebook if I want to keep my uh, blood pressure low. But anyway, someone was like asking there, if you support Trump, and they put Trump in quotation marks, can you explain why? I'll, watch any video, read whatever articles, just explain. I think personally the most eloquent explainer of why the Democrats are an evil party is Dinesh D'Souza. I would recommend anybody who's never actually listened to him and just, prejudge him because of a trumped up criminal record that he suffered from as a political prisoner. To really, watch his movies, listen to his explanations of history and so forth, I think that's worthwhile. But you're asking specifically about why I support President Donald Trump and not why I oppose the Democrats. Everyone knows that Will Rogers, well, maybe not everyone knows, but I'm sure a lot of folks know, maybe a lot of my viewers know, that Will Rogers famously quipped that he never votes for anyone, he only votes against. And that's how I felt in 2016. I did not like Donald Trump. I thought he was the worst candidate that the Republicans had. I was kind of scared that he was somewhat like a Manchurian candidate because of his close relationship with the Clintons. I thought he was going to throw the election, that this was kind of like the producers or something, where like he was like trying to lose this was just a stunt to help Hillary win. I really genuinely thought that, and I really, really wanted Ted Cruz to be our next president in 2016. Obviously would have taken office in 2017. So I voted for Cruz in the primary, but when election day came, I voted for President Trump. Mostly just because I believed at the time, I believe for decades, that Hillary Clinton is the epitome of evil. Since my childhood, I've just had an absolute disdain for this woman. And so reluctantly, I voted for Donald Trump, but I had a tremendous fear that Hillary Clinton would be our next president. I remember the night before, there was a village meeting at a nearby village, and I was literally shaking with fear. And God forbid we would hear that Hillary Clinton was our president. And when we heard Donald Trump was elected, I felt a sigh of relief. I'll tell you the truth, I hadn't felt so good in a long time. As when I heard that President Trump was elected. And it wasn't because I liked him, but just because I was happy that Hillary lost. As time went on, I think really for me the turning point, in my opinion, of President Trump really was at first it was when he picked Mike Pence to be his running mate. That kind of assured me that he wasn't the liberal that he'd always been his whole life, that he was someone who, could be a good president. And what really convinced me in a certain way at the time, and it's only gotten better since then, was at the inauguration. Among his first words, first of all, that his kindness to have Chuck Schumer speak before him. I thought that was a very magnanimous move, which impressed me very much. I had a feeling that when Senator Schumer spoke, that he was setting the stage for himself to perhaps run for president in 2020. When I mentioned that to people, they said, no, that's never going to happen. And they were right, of course. And then when I heard President Trump speak at his inauguration, and I'll paraphrase, I don't remember the exact words, but he said something along the lines that this is not merely the baton being tossed, being passed from one administration to another, from one party to another, but it's the restoration of the power back to the people where it belongs, taking it away from the reins of government and restoring power to the people. And at that time I realized that President Trump was the classical liberal that we actually been looking for, the almost libertarian, and that his liberalism wasn't a leftist liberalism. I had a fear that he would be some kind of a progressive Republican like Teddy Roosevelt type, big government, and that frightened me. But he proved us wrong, thankfully, not only in speech, but in deed. And really, my feelings about President Trump is that this man should be the great uniter. The thing that Senator Cruz, criticized him, saying, this guy, he's got New York values. It's not what middle America is looking for. It's not what Texas is looking for. They're not going to vote for him, and it'll make problems. And I agreed with that view. And again, I was gleefully and thankfully proven wrong. That, in fact, President Trump was not a big government populist nationalist that we thought he was and we were afraid of, but rather he was someone who was, and we were afraid that he was some kind of a Republican progressive, kind of like the Bushes, kind of like others. It was a fear, and he proved us wrong. Thank God that he restored the power to the people. He loosened the reins of government, allowed America to excel, allowed America to soar again, allowed the people to have the freedom. And I saw a benefit from it personally. I personally saw when I graduated college and I was ordained, I went into the workforce. President Bush was still the president, and I right away had a nice full-time job. Shortly after Obama came into the White House, I was struggling with several part-time jobs and not making what I was making in the full-time job. Working at times 4 or 5 jobs, as a college grad, with essentially the equivalent of a postgraduate degree with my ordination would be equivalent of a master's degree, and not able to find work. And working the job that I had at the time that was full-time turned to quarter-time. And then I had a few other jobs here and there, doing whatever I could to just try to grasp at straws to make ends meet. And it continued all throughout the Obama administration. And shortly after President Trump took office, things started to get better. And now I have the best job that I ever had, plus another part-time job, plus a side hustle, small business, and I'm, thank God, very successful right now. The part-time job that I had before, I'm losing a little bit on right now because of COVID, or the reaction to COVID. But other than that, things are great. My small business is doing better than ever, and things are really, really great for me and my family. I feel bad for those who are suffering, but they're suffering not because of President Trump. They're suffering because of the big government Democrats who are doing something unconstitutional. President Trump is trying to stop them, and that's what we would have more of if God forbid Biden becomes the president, because we know he won't actually be the president. He'll be a puppet of some other puppet masters. Now, when it comes to a lot of the criticisms, now really I believe that President Trump should be the great uniter, and I really think he is. I think everything that he has done has served to unite this country. And it's the media and the liars in the media, the fake news, that are really trying to not just hate on President Trump, but tear apart this country at the seams and divide and conquer, pit us against each other. The types of things that are often said in criticism of President Trump, the vast majority of those things President Obama started, whether it's separating families at the border. That was an Obama policy. I think it was a Bush policy before that. And yet they made it sound like President Trump was responsible for that. President Trump put an end to it. He asked Congress to try to help him put an end to it. In the end, he managed to executively work on that. The so-called Muslim ban, which is not a Muslim ban, was an Obama policy, an Obama executive order that President Trump merely temporarily added to. And the only thing that he added in addition to that was some non-Muslim countries were added to the list. People say, constantly lie again and again. Biden did it yesterday, claiming that President Trump called neo-Nazis and white supremacists fine people when he did no such thing. He said that on the peaceful protesters, there were fine people on both sides of the issue as far as removing the statue. And he said there were bad people on both sides of the violent, on both sides. I won't even call the neo-Nazis on the right. They're not right-wing. They're really left-wing. They're big government. They're obsessed with identity politics. They're basically Democrats. The so-called alt-right, which I sometimes call the European right, meaning the American right is more libertarian and classically liberal, whereas the European right is really basically just another prong on the fork of the left. That's why the Nazis were National Socialists. The only difference between the National Socialists and the International Socialists, the Communists, was, again, they're two sides of the same coin. And also the Communists killed more people than the Nazis. But they're both bad, and they're both left-wing, essentially. They're both big government, obsessed with identity politics, etc., etc., against traditional religion, and so forth. The only thing that I'm uncomfortable with President Trump is something that a lot of my co-religionists like about him is his pro-Israel stance, and I don't have a problem with his pro-Israel stance if he sees Israel as a valuable strategic ally. But I do have a problem with him identifying American Jews as having some kind of a connection to the political state of Israel, when it's really only appropriate to have maybe a religious devotion to the land. That's my only real problem with him, and I can't blame him for that, because it's probably what he learned from his daughter and son-in-law, who are Zionists. And again, they're pious Orthodox Jews. I don't have a personal problem against them, but I do disagree with their ideology. on that, and I think they've improperly influenced him. Beyond that, that's pretty much, that's my main critique of President Trump. But as far as most of the things that they're saying, these claims that he's racist, when in fact he's done a lot of things to help, not only things that have helped all Americans, that includes African Americans, but things that have been proactive to really correct the actual systematic racism that the Democrats have put on this country over the years, because the Democrats are the party of racism historically, and continue to be so, albeit in a different manner, but there's really not that much of a change. And his help, his support for historically black colleges, his work on criminal reform, criminal justice reform, noting how much African Americans have been unfairly mistreated in the criminal justice system, and other various aspects, and obviously, and the opportunity zones in the inner cities, and obviously in general, all of his financial and economic policies have benefited everyone to the point where we have the lowest black unemployment and so forth, as is well documented. And I don't know if how it is that you didn't know about this, but this is true. Again, I'm not explaining why I'm against Joe Biden, but the fact of the matter is he's a segregationist, he's a racist, he's a misogynist, all these things. When they talk about things that President Trump said which were inappropriate, he prefaced them with "they let you," as opposed to, and so even if they're disgusting and immoral, they're not necessarily. There was no lack of consent, as opposed to the issues with Joe Biden, where he probably did things that lacked consent there. So that's and there's a major difference between the two. They're both wrong, but one is criminal and the other one is just merely immoral. And so while President Trump's personal life may have been immoral, I believe Joe Biden's has been criminal. I don't believe that Russia or Putin wanted Donald Trump to win. I believe that's a lie that the Democrats made up. And if anything, the fact of the matter that it's claimed that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote points to that if there was Russian meddling in the election, it was either just to make general mayhem and not to help either party, or I think more likely to support Hillary, because if you're a dictator like Putin, they would much rather. I think someone like Putin would much rather have someone like Hillary in office, who can be bought off, who's predictable, as opposed to someone like Donald Trump that you don't know what he's going to do. And really, if he is so pro-Putin, he hasn't really done a good job of it, because he's really done a lot of things that have been negative against Russia that he's rightly done and that needed to be done. So that's it in a nutshell. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you later.